Let's take a look at the property sector. Our next guest runs the largest online real estate website in Southeast Asia with 25 million users a month, and he appears to be bullish about prospects for the region's property sector. Let's bring in Hari Krishnan, CEO of PropertyGuru, joining me here in the Lion City. The question really is, this has been propped up by local demand. Is foreign demand back to push up property prices even higher?
So I think, property demand has always been there, both domestic as well as international demand has been there. I think what's been really changing things is, the situation with all the large unblocks, etc. A lot of folks have been sitting on the sidelines. And right now, based on our indices, we track property sentiment, the consumer sentiment seems to indicate that people are willing to jump in now.
But when you take a look at foreign demand, where is it coming from? There's a lot of views out there that Chinese demand is pushing up prices in Singapore as well as Malaysia.
So I think that's not a new trend. I think, Chinese demand has been there for many, many years. We are not seeing any skew of that nature right now. I think that, their percentage of demand continues to be there. There's no sudden inflation in it, if you like. We're seeing a sudden jump in domestic demand for sure. We are seeing a big uptick in Q1 of this year when compared to, let's say, Q3, Q2 last year.
So the recovery in the property sector pretty much intact?
I'd say in Singapore,
for sure. Will it gain momentum?
Yeah, that's the big question. I think there's definitely bullishness for this year. I think the question still remains, will this be sustainable into next year and beyond? Time will tell us. Yeah.
So, Hari, you know what? I'm getting a lot of targeted ads on my social media. Not that I would perhaps oblige those invitations to buy property in Southeast Asia, but give us a sense. If I did oblige, all right, which is the market I should be getting into and making that property investment this year?
Yeah, that's a great question because Southeast Asia, it sort of just sweeps and sort of generalizes across so many different markets. If I were to sort of elaborate a little bit, if you look at Malaysia, for example, we believe it'll bottom out at some point this year. There's been a lot of oversupply for a period of time, but we're beginning to see sentiment begin to shift over there. In Thailand, by contrast, we are seeing, continued sort of, I'd say, steady growth. There's no massive uptick, but we're seeing a steady growth over there. There's definitely a potential for further growth. But, Singapore is a big place that we've been talking a lot about simply because we had 4 years of sort of systematic drops in prices and sort of a slowdown, if you like, in the property sector. And Q4 last year, Q1 this year of the calendar year, we're beginning to see a clear uptick.
Right. So, Hari, you're currently in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam. I can't help but notice you're not in the Philippines. It lacks from that list. I'm not asking because I'm Filipino, but it's easily been one of the fastest growing economies in Southeast Asia these last 4 years. Is there any specific reason you're not in the Philippines?
Yeah, when you talk about our market approach, I think Philippines still remains something that we are evaluating. In our sector, it's far more important to be strong and valuable in a particular market rather than just putting out a bunch of beachheads. And so if you look at each of those markets you just talked about, with a strong market leader in Singapore, in Indonesia, and in Thailand, and in Malaysia, we caught the market leader last year. And so, we are much more interested in creating a certain scale so that the marketplace actually works, both for the consumers but also for the sellers.
I want to talk about your fundraising plans. The last time you went to market was 2015, and there was a lot of talk about you IPOing. Will you, won't you?
So I think, IPO is always a means to an end in my mind. It's not the finishing line for any company, and we definitely don't see it that way. We've spent the last few years focusing on profitability. I'm pleased to share that this year we will return to profitability as we had forecast. We've seen growth of over 20% year on year for the last 3 years. IPO remains as one of the options we look at. We're very proud of the fact that we've been self-sustaining, not raised funding since May of 2015. We have a strong and constructive board right now. But I think, as we look into the future, it is entirely possible that we might return there at some point. Not so much for operational cash flow, but just to create options for M&A or, future possibilities.
Looking at your numbers right now, what's a possibility? What time frame could an IPO happen? In the next, 2 to 3 years? 1 to 2 years?
So it's definitely not this year. I can say that. I think beyond that, who's to say? I think, the way the business is trending, growing north of 20%. I think, a couple of weeks ago, we announced a major refresh of our websites, our apps, even our brand and logo. I think the whole idea is, listen, we have learned, consumer demand is clearly there. We have 25 million people coming on our platform. We're growing much faster than our entire sector and all our competitors. So I think what we've understood is, if we understand consumers so well, how can we take it to the next level? How can we make the solutions more relevant for them? And so a lot of our solutions now are based on artificial intelligence. The more you use our platform, the more it will become your platform. So the whole idea being, if we understand what you want, we should be putting you in front of the right houses and vice versa, selling you the right stuff as well.
Yeah, Hari, in fact, I'm glad you brought it up. So what you're saying is you're bringing personalization to the core of your solutions here. Now, recently, we've seen a pushback to that concept because personalizing means me giving up a little bit more privacy. How do you marry those two things? Mm-hmm.
That's a great question. I'm loving this debate we're having right now in the sector because I think it was long overdue. Frankly, when you look at it, there are two kinds of data. There's personally identifiable information, and then there's just generic data when it comes to browsing behavior or how you're looking at it. If you look at the second category, the browsing behavior, etc., for a long time we've had this. When you look at online travel or other sectors, you're used to the fact that once I've done a few searches or I've interacted with your platform, you should be surfacing more relevant stuff for me. Why am I starting at the beginning and filling forms again and again? So I think in that sector, there's a lot more that artificial intelligence could do to put relevant stuff in front of you. When it comes to personally identifiable information, that's a totally different thing, because there we got to be very careful. We got to be very deliberate about sharing with our consumers as to what exactly we want from them, how that data is going to be used, and then making it really clear that they understand what we're going to do with it. And I think that's the battle that's been at the forefront of all the headlines so far.